Hello and welcome back to another Pinky McGree. Hey!
It's party time, chumps.
Greetings, warm wishes, and a wonderful welcome to you, dear viewer. If you're watching this, it means that you, too, want to
burn DreamWorks to the ground.
I'm joking. No, I'm not.
Anyways,
This video is something that has been rattling around in my head for a very long time. To say that Voltron was a big part of my life would be an understatement. It, along with Star Wars Rebels, oddly enough, was my first introduction to fandoms, fanfiction, and all the wonderful things that come with them. And like many diehard fans, I was disappointed doesn't seem strong enough. It was like watching a plane nosedive in slow motion while you yell at the pilot to do anything, and all they do is say, "Huh?" And then the plane crashes, and you want to strangle the pilot for being so incompetent that they wouldn't even know what a brake pedal looked like if it bit them on the butt. I digress. For all its shortcomings, though, I still love this series. I'm not sure if it's the characters, the art style, or the universe it's set in, guns and magic and pointy things, or all of the above. But it felt like there was something truly amazing that could have been done here. All it needed was a more fleshed out backdrop and a studio that wasn't constantly putting its foot in its mouth and sticking its nose where it didn't belong. I'm not saying I'm more experienced than official DreamWorks and Netflix writers. I'm really not. But hopefully I can take this source material and rework it into what it could have been. This will be a multi-part series wherein I simultaneously dissect what I didn't like about the original. No, not that one. That's not it either. What an Alfor's beard! Okay, I'm just gonna call it VLD, and the rewrite I'm making will simply be The Rise of Voltron. Everybody got that? Okay? Okay. Before we jump in, however, I feel like this is important to say. Thank you, Lauren Montgomery and Joaquim Dos Santos, for giving us this series. It wasn't the best ever, and its fandom was problematic at best, but everyone should keep in mind that if they didn't give us what we have, we wouldn't be able to rewrite anything. It was the creativity of them and their team that gave us fans an amazing new universe to explore. So thank you, VLD crew. This wouldn't be possible without you. You know, me and hundreds of others fixing your stuff. Oof. And on that note, come along, dear viewer, and let me take you on a journey through a setting you know with an entirely new history. Now, Voltron's lore was very sparse, if we got to see any at all, and seemed rather rudimentary, like the writers felt obligated to throw some kind of backstory in, instead of having this thought out beforehand and simply finding opportunities to show just how deep the rabbit hole of their imagination could go. This left the universe feeling rather hollow and uninteresting. I'm not saying they had to explain everything, but the scale of everything should be obvious. Like how Avatar made the world feel so large even if we only saw pieces of it. Just a little heads up. Yes, I will be making very many references to Avatar because the story writing in that show was top tier. Deal with it. As the most prominent example, or at least one of the most for me, the big guy himself. Having Alfor be the one to build the lions, I feel, was a bit too much. In fact, having there only be one generation of paladins behind our main characters makes the universe feel so much younger and less mysterious than before we knew exactly how and when Voltron was made. If that was the intent, then well done, but it doesn't feel right to me. You may note this is also what happened in Legend of Korra. They demystified the Avatar, a being whose draw for many viewers, myself included, was the mystery. By taking that away, you immediately made even the concept of the Avatar far less engaging. You don't need to explain everything. Just make sure that enough is explained so that the audience understands the world they're in and make it feel lived in. That's it. If something is ancient, leave out some things. That'll instantly make it far more intriguing. Quick side quibble that ties into the main point. 10,000 years in the cryopod was too long because, how do I put this? The Galra have FTL travel and robot soldiers as the bulk of their forces. As they conquered planets, they would gain more resources, allowing them to build more ships with more sentries and conquer more worlds and gain more resources. And basically, how have the Galra not gotten to Earth or even Eris in 10,000 years? They're supposed to be this great big feared warrior race, and now they have magic, so what is taking them so long? This makes it feel like the writers were trying to mesh Aang's 100-year sleep with Korra's 2 throw rugs fighting every 10,000 years, and that's also how long the Avatars existed. Surprise! aka a big number just for the sake of having a big number. Now imagine instead that the legend of Voltron has existed in some capacity throughout the universe for roughly 10,000 years, but no one knew if it was real or not. It was simply a story that parents told their children at night. Then, during a fierce conflict of worlds in which planets threatened to be destroyed, hope emerged to end the bloodshed in the form of 5 lions. Wars were not new to the universe, but this one was more terrible than most. The marauding Lambanites had been invading and pillaging all other planets and shipping lanes in their sector for over a decaphoebe, including those of Dibazal and Altea. Their leaders decided to do something about it. Sending their best warriors and alchemists, the two worlds hoped to end the conflict quickly, but their enemy was harder to dispose of than they had hoped. In one of the costliest battles of the Vacante War, many ships were shot down onto a desolate planet, and only 2 survived. One was a first lieutenant in the Galra army, and the other, the crown prince of Altea. They decided to work together to find a way home. As they explored a nearby cave, hoping to find refuge from a storm that was raging outside, they found them, 2 enormous mechanical marvels said to be lost to time. And then they felt it. The call. Though their hands were on the controls, it was the lions who guided them to the others. Each had felt the war's sting and wished to end it, and so they did. The Lambanites were pushed back to their own world, and peace returned to the universe. As for the pilots, now given the proper title of Paladin, they each returned to their own home, but their bond had been forged in blood and brotherhood, and would never be forgotten. The prince became a king, the soldier became an emperor, and together with their new family, they set out to defend the universe. I know this sounds very basic, that's because it is, and it's meant to be. Just as the anime My Hero Academia paid homage to and broke down the classic dynamics of shonen battle anime in the form of the previous generation of heroes, I want the previous generation of paladins to be an homage to the classic fairy tales, where good triumphs over evil and everything is set right in the end. And then it all goes to shit. But that's not what this video is about. If ever I could actually put this concept to screen, this change would also allow more time to be focused on the personalities and dynamics of the old paladins, rather than a voiceover explaining everything. No offense to Karan, I love him too, I just think we should show instead of tell. The next part in, I hate to say it, but fixing the Voltron lore is fleshing out its world building, or universe building in this case. I'll preface this section of the video by saying that a good portion of this wouldn't need to make it into the show proper. Like I said before, sometimes less is more. But it's always good to have the details of your world in order so that even if you can't show it, it's still there, and you can give hints to it being there, thus making your viewers want to know more. Then you can provide them the extra information outside the show proper, instead of sticking it in important character stuff in a quiz-snacking vlog to tell us, oh, they totally had development, can't you tell? No, stop that! Write your show better! Don't stick it in as an afterthought! Sorry about that. I just really don't like those vlogs. But moving on. I do understand that an entire universe can't be fleshed out, that would be impossible, but for the peoples and places we spend time with, there should be at least some iota that this is a true culture and not just a backdrop. A big part of this starts with our main races, the Galra and Alteans. Specifically, we should know what makes them, and how they are unique from others. Let's start with the Galra, because I find them more interesting. Now, to know a people, you must first know the land. Translation, where they lived is key. If you look up the cycle of civilization, you'll see that how one lived is determined by where one lived. Judging by their warrior culture and many natural defenses, i.e. claws, fangs, etc., we can reasonably assume that Dibazal was a rather hostile environment. Factor in their large size, and it's probably safe to say that most things on the planet were large as well. A world made for giants. An interesting point that not many people have picked up on, though, is the variety of Galra. Almost no two are the same. Some YouTubers once theorized that they had interbred with other species so much that there were almost no truly full-blooded Galra left besides Zarkon. This was proven to be false by both the Galra having a Slytherin complex and the flashback episodes showing that they were diverse in the past, too. So, why the disparity? Well, besides making them distinguishable from each other, and giving fans lots of room to make some very cool-looking OCs, I believe I have created a suitable answer. I would say that there are 4 main biomes on Dibazol: the desert, the jungle, the plains, and the mountains. Galra from the plains were known as Nandaku, meaning birds of the earth. This was not a comment on their appearance, as no Galra have feathers, but rather it spoke of their speed. The Nandaku were known as the fastest of all their kin, and few could keep up with them. They were also the only variant able to grow hair. They took great pride in this fact, and would often grow their hair out into manes. Those of the desert were likewise known for their incredible endurance and scales. Though all Galra are literally thick-skinned, the Mardokis was even tougher, able to take a swing from an average sword with minimal damage. They could last for days without food or water, and were resistant to high temperatures. Similar to their Nandaku cousins' hair, the scale crests of the Mardoki were considered their most defining and attractive feature. The third variant were those of the jungle. These Galra were called Vari-Aken. They had short, stout fur that was generally darker and more blue than purple, and large cat-like ears. This helped them to become the stealthiest of all Galra, as they could move with near silent footsteps and hear even the smallest sounds in the dense foliage. The Vari-Aken also sported tails. Generally prehensile, they allowed these Galra to balance and swing through the jungle with ease. Finally, there were the mountain Galra, or Kriez. Kriez were rather large, even by Dibazolian standards, often dwarfing others. Covered in thick fur that was mostly lilac and white, the ears of these Galra were similar to those of the Vari-Aken, but were smaller and less defined, as they were somewhat hidden under the fur. This was a twofold advantage. Their ears were kept warm in the freezing mountain wind, and the fur acted as a buffer, cancelling out most of the noise that said wind caused, allowing them to hear predators, avalanches, and each other. It should go without saying, but they were also the physically strongest clans, and had resistance to extremely low temperatures. So, why don't we see these distinct kinds of Galra today? For the same reason a human can be Euro, African, Australian, Hispanic. Interbreeding. Ugh, I hate using that term for this. As Dibazol became a unified planet, the many different tribes began to intermingle and share traits, creating such variation that sometimes siblings couldn't even be identified as siblings. And speaking of family, you know how in the initial seasons of VLD, the only female Galra we saw were Lotor's generals? Was this to make them stand out even more than them being half-bloods already did? Or was it just to keep up Lotor's harem? I don't know. Why were there suddenly female commanders in the final seasons when we'd never seen them before? Did you ever find it odd that a warrior race would send robots to fight their battles rather than die gloriously on the spears of their enemies? Well, if you didn't, fear not, because I certainly did. Like, too much. Aside from the fact that using droids in overwhelming numbers is just a better strategy, I believe that the Galra also have a population problem. And no, I don't mean that they're super self-destructive and trying to weed out the weak from the strong. I mean they have a very low birth rate. Despite usually having 2 to 3 babies at a time, it's actually very difficult for female Galra to get pregnant. Because of this, women and children are kept as far away from the fighting as possible. Family is considered sacred and must be protected at all costs. Any who harms a Galra's wife or child has basically just forfeited their own life, and is subject to whatever the offended party deems appropriate for the crime. Note, this does not mean that the female Galra can't fight, they simply have a different role in society than the men, and must stay at home to both take care of the children and be the last line of defense should the worst happen. The reason I decided to go in this direction was because while watching this show for the first time, this was actually my working theory. This could also explain the Galra's prejudice against half-bloods. Maybe they fear that crossbreeding could have a negative effect on birth rates. This fear could have been then compounded by the fact that during her first pregnancy, or perhaps right after giving birth, you never know, their Altean empress died. Yeah, that's kinda concerning. I also wanted to give the Galra more to their culture than just the warrior aspect. For instance, I would add that they were also some of the best weaponsmiths in the galaxy. As the men worked in the forge, the women would likewise take up the arts. They would be responsible for the music, fashion, and great works of art that were proudly displayed in every household. Note 2. Though men were not ostracized for learning these skills, it was generally more respectable for men and women to stick their own fields. Whew! Okay, that was a lot, I admit, but it's only because the Galra were given so little explanation for so much that a lot needed to be clarified. Don't worry, the next segments will be much shorter. On to the Alteans. For them, I figured why not go all out and make them the complete opposite of the Galra. Their planet was basically a garden world, with low mountains and minimal natural threats, allowing them to grow and advance their technology faster than almost any other race in the galaxy. The two major things that helped them further in this endeavor was their innate magical abilities and, despite only being able to have one baby at a time, very high birth rates. Science and sorcery grew together as one into what would be known as alchemy, allowing the Alteans to unite their people and send them out to the stars. With the discovery of Balmeras and Weblums would come increased energy capacity and the creation of the Teledoves. Great explorers would also become great diplomats, thanks to their minor shapeshifting abilities. It should be noted that both an Altean's capacity to shapeshift and their super strength vary depending on how magically inclined they are. This is why Allura can bust through a metal door that is several inches thick with minimal effort, while Coran struggles to steady a Balmeran crystal. Also, he old. They were intellectual by nature, always willing to push boundaries in the name of science, which led to the classic problem that scientists face.
But your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Experimenting with quintessence was their main focus, of course, but more specifically, they were trying to see how to modify animals or themselves in different ways, including extending lifespans, though these experiments came rather late in their time and wouldn't get very far. Also, AI and robotics. Obviously, Alteans possessed very advanced tech, allowing them to create thousands of robots for probably every task, much like we see in Star Wars. This begs the question then, what were their thoughts on cybernetics? Presumably, if they can create clothing and armor that can alter its form to fit the wearer, then it could have been possible to design robotic limbs that could do the same. Within reason, of course. Would many choose to augment themselves? The process of downloading someone's consciousness into a computer-compatible form doesn't seem to be some recently created process either. If it was around any longer than the war, did some of the Alteans who escaped the fall of their world use this process to escape and hide from the Galra? I would say yes. There isn't much more to be said about them, I feel, because we've already seen so much of them in multiple capacities. The only thing more I think I can add is perhaps showing that they aren't saints. I really don't like it when one race is shown as completely good or bad. As Sirius Black once said,
The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the part we choose to act on. That's who we really are.
even just showing glimpses of Alfor or other Alteans acting in perhaps not so good ways would go a long way in making them feel more realistic, as well as helping the team see the Galra, and everyone, from more than one angle, which could play into redeeming them and helping Keith be accepted. We even got a glimpse of this with the alternate reality Alteans and Hagar, so why not make their race as a whole more interesting? Also, lifespans. How long do Alteans, and Galra for that matter, live? If you look through VLD for an answer, well, Coran mentions in Season 1 that the Castle of Lions is about 600 years old, built by his grandfather, and that Coran would accompany him to Balmeras while he was building it. Then, in Season 2, Coran and Allura are stuck in a time loop where he is being de-aged every time they hit the endpoint. This happens 6 times. In the Season 3 flashback episode, we see Coran with the old Paladins before Voltron is even made, meaning the thing that was named after and most likely for it, the Castle of Lions, also wasn't built yet. Here we see Space Uncle as he was after the first time loop. Using this as a measurement, if this is Coran 600 years younger, and he was de-aged consistently 6 times, then Coran is about 3,600 years old, and only middle-aged.
I have several questions.
That is way too long for any reasonable race, so I am going to say that Alteans have instead a lifespan of about 1,000 years, and most other people's are comparable. As far as other races go, most of them are fine as they are, but why is Alcarion not completely terraformed? I'm just saying, they are literal tech wizards. Why haven't the Alcari made their planet into Cybertron? Are y'all even real scientists? Also, I need a bit more than a quick throwaway line about World War III.
I have several questions.
If this Earth has been through something like that, I personally would like to know a little bit more. Maybe see some stuff left over from battles, depending on when and where the fighting took place. Maybe some of the characters' families were in the war, and that's their reason for fighting? Just a thought. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. The magic system! Ugh, this is gonna take a while. Okay, I'll say this up front. I really don't like how the magic was handled in the show. It was all over the place, new powers would be introduced at random whenever the plot demanded it, and there were zero rules on how to use it, which allowed mortals to play God?
That ain't gonna fly.
If you know anything about world building, you are aware of the long-standing debate between hard and soft magic systems. For those of you who don't know, a soft magic system would be like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and most comic book universes, where magic can do most anything you want, only requiring training and either specific movement or word or both. This kind of system is used mostly by beginner writers or writers who want a lot of freedom to play loosey-goosey with what can be done. A hard magic system has rules at every turn, which clearly and consistently put limits on what can and can't be done. Fullmetal Alchemist is the most prominent and best example of this kind of system. There were strict boundaries that alchemy could do in that world, and very dire consequences for those who didn't follow those rules. Just for the record, I'm pretty fine with either and will take no side in this debate. However, a story does not have that luxury. It must pick a level and stick to it. For Voltron, the best course would be somewhere in the middle, much like, go figure, Avatar, Star Wars, or The Dragon Prince. There are clear rules, but a lot can be done within them. Based almost exclusively on energy manipulation, Quintessence magic would focus on connecting to and manipulating living things, such as making plants grow, healing injuries, and drawing in energy from the life around you to fire large blasts. Low-level alchemists would start with things like levitation, shields, and creating and manipulating fire, because fire is a form of energy. Their magic would be yellow because their powers were unrefined. High-level alchemists would have the more refined blue color and could do things like teleport, read and manipulate minds, and even have visions of the future. However, this would all take years and years of dedicated training, as well as a strong enough magical potential. Those who have advanced in their training will gain extra markings on their bodies, the shape and placement of which vary depending on the alchemist, but most will be displayed on the face. Now, as far as the Druids go, since we never learned what in the name of sanity they actually were, I'm going to say that they were Galra. Yes, some Galra have magic. However, it wasn't a very prominent practice due to one of the creatures that lived on Dibazol, the Roe. The Roe were gelatinous, energy-based parasites that infected and fed upon a living being's natural quintessence, passing to another host once the first had been reduced to a corpse, if there was one nearby. If there wasn't, the Roe would artificially keep the body alive like a zombie as it searched for a new live host. They were a plague to the Galran tribes, easily wiping out entire villages in a matter of days if left to feed and multiply. The only thing that could kill them was the ore Luxite. As the metal was rare and difficult to forge, only the greatest warriors were given these blades. Because Roe were attracted to large concentrations of quintessence, the development of magical abilities was forbidden for fear that it would attract them. Even living in large communities was dangerous. However, once the alliance was made between Dibazol and Altea, after an admittedly shaky introduction, they were able to use the alchemist's magic to lure, trap, and kill the Roe, allowing the young Galra magic users the opportunity to grow their gift in ways never thought possible before, though Dibazol would still remain less magical than their neighbors due to lingering superstition.
Ah, that didn't take too long. I feel lightheaded.
That was a lot, and I think my throat is going to be thrashed for the next few days, but these are the questions that need to be asked and answered when thinking about peoples, places, magic, technology, and history. All things that are integral to make a universe that makes sense. I will reiterate once more that you don't need to explain every little detail. Some mystery is good, but you can't skip the important stuff, otherwise your world will be made of Swiss cheese. Still delicious, but incomplete and unsatisfying. Okay, that was very long and very difficult for one such as me. If you've heard me in other videos, you know I don't usually talk this much or at this volume, ever. But this is a passion project of mine, and at the behest of my nagging sister, I will be making more of these videos. So please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the bell notification to make sure you're notified when new videos are uploaded. And that is all for this time. Later, Paladudes.